in the church we tend to cover up and, almost protect a lot of these ministers that commit a lot of atrocities, and we protect them sometimes under the guise of grace more than the victims. She apologized, but she kept saying towards the end, we need to remember, all the things that he had done. And it was like, why does that matter when he has potentially ruined the lives of all the victims that he came across? Some people will come and say, oh, God hates divorce. Yes, that might be in the Bible, but God loves his children and he wants you alive. He wants you alive and sane and happy to serve him. Hi guys, welcome to the Mo Chunk Show and welcome to another installment of Chit Chat with Mo, where we have controversial debates, honest conversation, incredible guest stories, and so much more. And before we go on, guys, I would like to at this point put a trigger warning to say that we're going to be talking about things of the nature of abuse as well as sexual abuse. So if that is something that you do not want to hear about, please kick off the video and join us on the next episode. So without further ado, let's get straight into this topic. As I said, guys, quite a heavy one. I'm going to be talking about, as you can see from the title of the video, I've decided to call it A Culture of Cover-Up, Abuse and the Church. A few things over the last few years or so have triggered this topic and added to my notes. I'm someone that I write a lot of things down as they are happening, and I've kind of moved away from the space of making reactive content in a sense of something happens and I make a video in reaction to it. So I kind of want to make my conversations a bit more timeless. So there are times that things will happen and I'll just put it in my notes and just do a bit more research, but I won't actually do a video straight away. And I say that to say that one of the incidences that actually triggered this topic was the Ravi Zacharias situation. And this was a pastor. No, he's not even a pastor. He is in ministry. He's in Christian ministry, and it's a bit of a strange one because he doesn't actually head a church, but he runs Ravi Zacharias International Ministry. He ran it rather when he was still alive. He passed away, and a bunch of stories about, sadly, assault in the nature of sexual assaults came out. And another story that happened in 2017, 3 years prior to when he died in 2020, another story resurfaced again. And there was now this whole new investigation about an old situation. And he's someone that was, in the Christian apologetic space. So, the scholars that, have theology on lock. They've also studied different religions, and they've studied things like atheism, and they've come up with a lot of logical reasoning to back up why we should follow Jesus and why he's the way, the truth, and the life. I say all that to say he was one of the first to trigger my notes surrounding this topic. However, this is something that I've observed over the years in terms of how in the church we tend to cover up and, almost protect a lot of these ministers that commit a lot of atrocities, and we protect them sometimes under the guise of grace more than the victims that have been subjected to the heinous acts that they've perpetrated over the years. Those were some heavy words, and that's because this is actually really something. Sometimes I'm speechless because I'm like, whoa, how do we constantly forgive the perpetrators and give grace to them without proper restitution and without proper justice for the victims? So let's get back into Ravi Zacharias. So Ravi Zacharias, like I said, was a Christian apologist, big in the apologetics game, someone that a lot of people looked up to, the way he would answer atheists and their questions without belittling them, and really use logic and reasoning. A lot of the times they wouldn't still accept what he was saying, but it's no doubt that he was someone that was well respected within the space. Did he over exaggerate some of his credentials? as we found out post his death, yes. But he was someone at the time that was seen to be a doctor and affiliated with Oxford and Cambridge and, wrote loads of books. Very, very well respected within this space. He'd run this ministry, Ravi Zacharias International Ministries, where, it's all about apologetics, along with his family, his wife, his daughter, taking on different leadership roles within the ministry, and, went around doing all these talks, all these speaking engagements, really pushing out the gospel. It came out prior to his death that, he was battling with cancer, and there was this call to pray for Ravi Zacharias, and a lot of us, responded to that call. A lot of people in the Christian space responded to that call, prayed for him that he would be healed. I believe it was mid-2020 he passed away, either mid or late 2020, passed away, and then these sexual assault allegations began to surface up, as well as there was a couple, I believe it was the Thomases. In 2017, it came out that he'd actually been sending inappropriate messages to someone's wife, and he had kind of groomed her to trust him because of, number one, his ministry, and also, being a well-respected person. He got a bit closer to her, and then things, became inappropriate between them. This all began to come out or resurface after he died. Now, there was a lot of people that were saying things like, the church knew. Not the church. He's someone that is confusing what his ministry was, but he wasn't a pastor. He just ran this ministry of apologetics. People around him in his ministry, there's allegations that they knew, and they covered it up and waited until he died, where he could no longer face the consequences of his actions. And that made me question a few things, why was it important to maintain this image that we have of this man? And even post his death, there was, an apology video that his daughter, who now runs the ministry, apologizing about what had happened. And she kept maintaining how much he had done for the gospel. She kept saying, she apologized, but she kept saying towards the end, we need to remember, all the things that he had done. And it was why does that matter when he has potentially ruined the lives of all the victims that he came across? Just to go into a little bit more detail, the allegations in terms of sexual assault, apart from the woman that he was sending inappropriate messages to, they also had a chain of spas. And apparently during his massages with these ladies, he would open up himself. He would, in some cases, touch himself. He would ask them for sexual favors, and of course they would decline. So it's he was putting these women through these heinous situations, and you're still here saying, let's remember what he did for the gospel. It kind of reminds me of another major person that kind of, because of what he had done, he definitely tainted his legacy, and that's R. Kelly. A lot of people were saying things like, you need to separate the music from the man. It's no, the man is the music. Where all of the music was coming from was inspirations of some of the things that he did. Sometimes I think because we're in the Christian faith, and because of this grace thing that we've been taught, we're always we can separate the sin from the person. Yes, you can sin and God can forgive you and you'll still go to heaven, but you should still be able to serve your sentences on earth. Grace gives you access to heaven, not freedom on earth. And I think that's something that we've completely confused within the Christian faith. I know I'm going in on Ravi, but I've still got a few people that I did some research on that I was wait, what is going on? Recently we had a beautiful singer, Osinachi, in Nigeria, who passed away, and in this case it was physical abuse at the hand of her husband. And apparently with this one, it's a very complicated issue in the sense of a lot of people knew, but apparently I wasn't there. Apparently she kept begging them not to tell her pastor what was going on within her marriage. Apparently there was people that saw him do certain things to her, get physical with her, just be really aggressive, or be controlling over her finances, or removing her away from her family. There was people that saw these things, but apparently they were not allowed to tell her spiritual leader, who was Dr. Paul Enneche. I hope I'm pronouncing his surname correctly. But even that, I really find it hard to believe that he didn't know. This was someone who's meant to be a spiritual covering for her. This was someone who essentially has her as the lead. When someone is the lead chorister in someone's church, I don't know if you could be that high up in the ranks and your pastor isn't aware of what's going on in your personal. I don't know how much she tried to cover things up, but something tells me that her spiritual covering was more aware than they're making out. You know, there's an amazing lady out, I think her name is Somaraku, and she's really broken down this topic really, really well. So I wouldn't want to say facts that, you know, I'm unsure of, but if you really want to know the facts around this case, please go on her channel and watch. You know, she's really broken this topic down. But I did find it ironic when, you know, the pastor, her leadership came out and said they didn't know they have a no tolerance policy against physical abuse. And I believe that part, but I don't believe the part that they had no clue. Because apparently, you know, as the story developed, and that's why I said go and watch Summer's YouTube videos about this, as the story develops, apparently there was a time when she did separate from him because of what was going on. And then pastors somewhere, they haven't specified which pastors it was, pastors went to beg her, and then she came back. So to now come and say that no one knew what was going on to this lady, I personally don't know how much I believe that. And again, I believe that was a whole cover up in terms of some of the pains that she was going through, but her talent was still being utilized on the pulpit. Really, really sad case. Unfortunately, she did pass away. Yeah, I think that's just woken up a lot of people to like some of the things that are going on, you know, within church institutions and within the body of Christ, things that they could be better protected against if we took some of these things seriously and we were more concerned about who the victim is as opposed to whatever image we're trying to maintain. Some people will come and say, oh, God hates divorce. You know, yes, that might be in the Bible, but God loves his children and he wants you alive. You know, he wants you alive and sane and happy to serve him. I don't know the mind of God, but I strongly believe that God loves his children and will want them alive and sane, is what I'm trying to say with that. So I think in some instances, beyond Osinachi, I think there probably have been a lot of, you know, women and men in abusive marriages within Christian communities unable to say anything or unable to leave or not even being allowed to leave by their spiritual leadership because of how it would look. What would people say? How it would look if this amazing chorus star was divorced or whatever it is. I think someone even made an important point. I think they said Victoria Orenze, who's like another amazingly gifted singer in Nigeria. She's divorced. She left. It's not the end of the world if something becomes abusive or something is abusive and it's no longer working for you. It's no longer making you happy. It's not the end of the world if you moved on from that. So that's Nigeria. There's been several cases of this happening. And then, of course, another recent one has been the whole thing happening with Hillsong. There was Carl Lentz, who stepped down. He was one of the top pastors, but not the top. And then there was the top pastor himself of like all the churches. I believe he started Hillsong, Brian Houston. Yeah, his title is Global Senior Pastor of Hillsong Church. So he recently resigned as well because of inappropriate behaviour with two women. I believe the first one was something like he was drunk and then he went to knock on the wrong hotel room. He was in a hotel somewhere, knocked on the wrong hotel room and started having an inappropriate conversation with a woman. He maintains that nothing physical happened, but it's like, to the point where you have to resign. And apparently there was another one where he was emotional. That I see that come up a lot. That seems to be a trend among some of these pastors. They say they didn't have a physical affair, but they had an emotional affair. To the point where both Carl Lentz and, you know, Brian both had to step down. It's really sad. And I said, sometimes I think the priority is protecting these leaders, men of God, touch not my anointed kind of trope, protecting them and offering them more grace than offering the victims of what's going on, offering them the justice, providing the exposure to the sins that are going on so that in, you know, for example, Osinachi's case, she could live. Sin thrives, or heinous acts. Let's not over spiritualize it and call it sin. Crimes, they thrive when they are kept in secret, when they are covered up, when it's more about let's protect these men of God or let's protect this institution of marriage. So much so that you hide and hide and hide until something tragic happens, like in the case of Osinachi, or until victims' lives are ruined or victims' lives are continually ruined. Obviously, with the case of Ravi, we only heard about these women, these X amount of women that came forward and said, this happened to me. If it had been nipped in the bud, how many more women would have been protected? If he was locked up in a jail somewhere, how many more women would have been protected, you know, from the same act he continued to perpetuate? And it's like, it's been alleged that, you know, his ministry were aware of what was going on. So Yeah, the trend I've noticed is that there seems to be like this cover-up thing going on within the church when abuse happens. I forgot to mention in the UK here itself, there's been a few. Okay, I'm struggling as to whether to mention their name or not because this one's a bit closer to home. There was Kadosh Kingdom Movement. The leader of that, Elijah Chanak, was, it was alleged. There's been allegations of like sexual assault. So guys, on the day we were filming this episode, I was actually trying to decide along with my crew whether I should touch on this particular topic because it's so close to home, and I remember feeling a bit let me just keep it brief or not even mention it at all. But lo and behold, like not long after we filmed this, Elijah, I call him Chanak, but I've heard Shanak on another video. But anyway, Elijah showed up after a year-long hiatus, and came back and basically said, I've gone through a process of restoration. There was an initial video before this one that you're seeing on the screen where he was basically saying that he's gone for a process of restoration. He's been under leadership and he's ready to bring back his church. And of course, everybody was a bit bewildered. You've gone away for so long. You've allegedly done all these acts against your members. People have come forward and, all sorts of accusations, things of sexual nature, things of just like a domineering leadership style. And you've just come back and, you said, yeah, I'm back kind of thing. It wasn't like that, but you know what I mean. So that video was taken down, not to be seen anymore. And then this apology video where there seemingly was a lot more accountability being taken was done. And this was also after a group, I believe it's called the Church Tribunal. They put up an article basically detailing some of the things he had done, in a bid to kind of say, look, this time around, we're not going to sweep this one under the rug. And this was the first time I've seen, although they were anonymous, but I'm guessing they were Christians, Christians coming together and saying, no, we're not going to stand for this. You can't just go and come back and start running the church again. And I also saw there was another video where his leadership that he's now under were saying, they've restored him and they were praying for him and stuff. And to me, this is what I mean by not a misunderstanding of grace, in a sense of, must he be a pastor? It's okay to serve God from the congregation. Not everyone should be teachers. It even says it's so in the Bible that you'll be judged much more harshly. Being a shepherd is not an easy thing to do. Neither is it something that should be taken lightly, especially if you've committed some atrocities with those that God has entrusted into your hands. That was just my thoughts. My thoughts isn't, do I not believe whether he's been restored or whatever. My thoughts were just, must you run a church? And you'll see, the next example I give, Pastor Building Fatoyinbo. It's just, I don't know why they insist on being leaders. Like in the case of, Brian Houston and Carl Lentz, at least they stepped down. Maybe it was controversy that made them step down. Maybe it was because their leadership and, board of directors, they're a lot stricter in Hillsong and that's why they had to go. But yeah, in some of these cases, I've wondered, must you lead? Must you be in charge of the flock? We're all prone to error, but know your capacity at the same time, especially with the magnitude of the office that you want to serve in. Pastor Biodun Fatoyinbo continues to run his church in Nigeria, despite, the allegations against him as well. His members continue to flock. And guys, lastly, I really wanted to touch on, whilst I highlight in this video where I feel like members of the church have failed one another when it comes to cases of abuse, I think it's very important for me to highlight, a case that I believe has been done due diligence so far. And I don't know the full details of this because the Jakes family, which it involves, haven't really given much details except for just the legalities of what's happened so far. So some of you may or may not be aware that Cora Jakes, who was married to Richard Brandon Coleman, she recently got divorced from him. And this case is a very sensitive case because it involves minors. And it's been alleged that, there was some assault going on. Again, the case is not very clear. But one thing I do want to highlight from this, that I was very proud of how the Jakes family handled this case, in a sense of, soon as they found out, they called the authorities. They protected those children. He is now currently in jail whilst the case is either still going on or whether it's been concluded. I'm not sure. But I was really, really happy to hear that they protected those children straight away. And, she is sadly now, that's Cora, going for a divorce, to separate from him. Yes, I would say that this is one case that I was very pleasantly surprised to see such a prominent family, which is the Jakes family, handle with such grace but also justice for those children. Really, really well done. And I don't know how the case is going to evolve, but from what I've seen, I think it's important to highlight the cases that have been handled well and carefully and, with the victims in mind. And I hope all involved, in terms of Cora and the children, I just extend so much prayers towards them to heal from this ordeal. What are your thoughts, guys, on this culture of cover-up within church institutions when it comes to abuse of many forms? Why is it that sometimes we care more about the perpetrators, especially when they are in powerful spiritual leadership positions? Why is it more that we care about them than the victims? Why is it that we care more about offering them grace than providing justice to the victims that these heinous acts have already been perpetrated towards, and also to protect potential future victims? Why is it that we care more about this than justice? You guys let me know in the comment section down below. Do you think that there's anything that we can do to kind of change these narratives surrounding abuse and the church, abuse in marriages, conversations around divorce, and so much more? Just let me know your thoughts on this topic in the comment section down below. And that's all I really have for you guys today. Do make sure you like this if you liked it, share it with your friends, comment below on the things I spoke about, and subscribe to this channel for more. Until next time, guys, peace and love, peace and chunks.